pull this off now. You want to be very careful about this surface. You don't want to let it be clunking down there and hitting that surface. And we're going to pull this seal off now. And you should be able to just pull it right off. Yeah, this one's really degraded, so it doesn't want to come off very well. And there, I just pulled the seal right off. Now the inner spindle bearing seal has some dust and stuff on it from the machining process, I guess. So I'm going to wipe all that off it. Just a tiny bit of grease, just rust prevention. Just on this machine part where the bearing will sit, the seal will sit. Okay, now slide the seal on. Just press it on with your fingers. Wipe off any debris, dirt, any contaminants off the mating surfaces. Get a little bit of anti-seize. You want to just very lightly coat these surfaces. This will prevent rust, and if you ever have to take it off again, it will make it easier to get it off. Clean the area where the seal rides, and clean the spindle bearing area. Also want to clean the axle shaft. I'll get some of our grease, and we'll pack it into the spindle bearing. Want to make sure you got some grease on the sealing surface of the outer spindle bearing. I'm going to lubricate the part where the spindle bearing rides and the spindle bearing inner seal. Make sure you get this part of the shaft too, just to prevent rust. Now on the ABS versions, the spindle will have these notches in it. I can tell where they go because there's a dirt mark right here from where the notch was, and then the other notch goes right over this hole for the ABS sensor, so it lines up this way. If yours doesn't have that for some reason, that would be on the F-150s. You want to make sure that this keyway right here needs to be upwards, needs to be straight up. So we'll slide that on gently, carefully. Okay, you want to make sure that it's seated securely. Now, put the nuts back on. Like I said, I like to use a little star pattern. Now there's a number of different ways to remove the wheel seal. The way I like to do it is take a long screwdriver, get right on the edge of the flange of the seal, and just bend it inward like this. Be careful not to damage the rotor. I have it sitting on a rag so I don't damage the end of the hub. You can see I'm just bending it inwards. This of course damages the wheel seal. Once you've done this all the way around, it should just come right out. And there we go. The inner bearing is larger than the outer bearing. I still have the bearing here held in by the tape from earlier. And there's that one. I'll get these cleaned up and repacked. Okay, time to put the wheel seal on. Just going to set it down and just slowly tap it all the way around. Get a little grease on the seal. Lube the mating surface of the ABS sensor shield with a little bit of anti-seize. Do the same on the inside of the hole for the ABS sensor. Bolt in the ABS sensor and then bolt in the ABS sensor shield. The ABS sensor and sensor shield are installed and the spindle is lubricated. Now it's time to install the hub and rotor assembly. So just carefully slide it on and be sure that the wheel seal properly seats on its sealing surface. Now insert the wheel bearing, the outer wheel bearing. Now take the spindle lock nut, grease it up a bit, and when you put it in, you need to make sure that this tab is at the top and that it's aligned with the notch that's in the spindle. Slide it in until it contacts the threads. Now, very carefully and gently use the lock nut socket to thread it on. If it goes just a tiny bit and then stops, don't keep threading it on. It means it's going to cross thread. Switch to the breaker bar. Back off 90 degrees. Alright, now we'll do the final torque to 15 to 20 degrees. Double check that. That's 20 foot-pounds. Okay, now first is the hub body. Just put a light layer of grease on it. It doesn't need a lot. Next we'll do the axle C-clip. Now because the seal is new, it's pulling the axle inward. So you need to move the axle back out enough so that you can get the C-clip on there. And I did that by pulling this way on the U-joint. Just a teensy tiny layer of grease on the snap ring. Reinstall the snap ring. Now reinstall the outer snap ring. Reinstalling it is much easier than removing it. There's a small screwdriver, you just pop it on into the groove all the way. Next, install the lock ring spring and the lock ring. Grease it up just a bit on the splines. Get that loop started in there. Last piece is the cap. Now, it's all back together now. The one last step before we put the brake caliper back on and put the wheels back on is to clean the brake rotor. So if you're like me, you got grease all over it. And if you leave the grease on there, it's going to contaminate the brake pads. So, spray it down with some brake cleaner. Wipe it off with the rag. I usually do this 2 or 3 times, both sides. And that's how you change your spindle bearing and wheel seals.